This is Title 18, Word Crimes. I'm Eric Arneson. Remember to subscribe to Word Crimes on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you enjoy the show, please take a minute to rate Word Crimes on iTunes or Stitcher. Scott Detrow and I would appreciate it, and it will help new people find the podcast. On this episode, Scott reads Bliss by Mary Jones.
Snip, 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 snip. Stan was clipping his toenails.
Mary Jones is a prolific author whose most recent novel, In the Woods, is available now. NetGalley called In the Woods a complex crime story, well-paced with many twists and turns. In the Woods features Harper Jennings. She's a fascinating character who is both an Iraqi war vet and an archaeology graduate. The book is set in a Pennsylvania state park, so as a Pennsylvania resident, I love that. Harper and her husband are enjoying a child-free camping trip when she stumbles across a dead body. In the Woods is the fifth Harper Jennings book, and I will link to all of them in the show notes for this episode. Mary's other recent books include The Trouble with Charlie and Elective Procedures. Here's the short story Bliss by Mary Jones, read by Scott Detrow.
Snip, 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 snip. Stan was clipping his toenails. Of course he was, even here, even now. No one clipped toenails more often than Stan. I lay back on the ornate comforter, holding my forehead, my jaws tightening with each clack of the clipper. Snip, snip. I grabbed the remote, turned on the large flat-screen TV to drown the sound, not caring what the program was. It was the news, a story about deaths caused by the weather. 4 so far. Snip, snip. The Chicago air was, clack, unhealthy. Heat plus humidity feeling like 103. Thunderstorms, clack, snip, snip, clack, were predicted, but snip, they wouldn't snip, bring clack, much relief. Snip, I scratched my arms, wanted to fly out of my skin, to escape. Clack, 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 oh God. 8 more nails to go. No one but Stan clipped so loudly or so much. At least 7 clips per toenail. Rapidly. Why? Why couldn't he just clip off the whole nail at once? Okay, twice for the big toe. Why was he so damned ineffective? Inefficient even at positioning toenail clippers. I covered my ears, smothering the anchorman's voice, but not the nail clippers. I could feel it, vibrating the 2 thin walls like an axe. Clack, clack, Christ. I pushed a faux-down pillow against my ears, closed my eyes, bit my lip, began counting to 60. 1 Mississippi. 2 Mississippi. At 40, I stopped, cautiously removed the pillow, listened, waited. Thank God, no more clipping. But now the water was running, which meant he was about to gargle. I turned up the television volume, even though it was useless. There was no way to escape. Stan's noises and habits weren't just in the room. Over the last 10 years, they'd penetrated my mind. Hell, they'd entered my skin, my bones and viscera. I knew Stan's routines, predictable, unshakable, unvaried, and maddening. I knew what sounds were coming, and in what order. Not just in the bathroom, anywhere. Stan didn't deviate, ever. Chewing with his mouth open, bouncing his knee when he sat, jiggling coins as he waited, even breathing too loud, whistling zippity-doo-dah when he was cheerful. These and other equally annoying behaviors continued no matter how much I pleaded with him to stop them. Stan was achingly, paralyzingly, numbingly predictable. And he would be. Forever. But maybe I was being too harsh. After all, the man was making an effort bringing me to this extravagant hotel. Even though he'd only gotten a deal by reserving online and had made the plans only after our fight, just to prove me wrong, Stan had still surprised me. Predictable? His nostrils had flared and he'd raised an eyebrow. As always after dinner, the kitchen table had vibrated with the bouncing of his leg. You think I'm predictable? I don't think you are. I'd braced myself for the wet, squeaky sound of air sucking through his front teeth. Stan's habit when he was annoyed. So, what are you saying, Claire? He'd sucked air. I'm not exciting enough for you? I didn't say you were unexciting. I said you were predictable. Please stop bouncing your foot. What the hell is that supposed to mean? After 10 years, what would you like? Air suck. Foot bounce. What would be unpredictable enough for you? Suck. Stan, for God's sake, stop sucking air through your teeth. What? He'd stopped mid-suck. How many times do I have to tell you? I mimicked the air suck, a short, squishy whistle. I can't stand it. He'd stood, shoved his chair away from the table. Oh, Lord. Now he was going to start pacing. Apparently you can't stand a lot of things. He'd paced in a circle. Predictable, huh? So, should I get my nipples pierced? Or take up skydiving? I'd laughed out loud. You? Don't be ridiculous. He stopped pacing. Ridiculous, really? Air suck. No, I'm not just predictable. I'm also ridiculous. Finally, I told him to forget I'd said anything. I'd done the dishes and checked Junior's homework while Stan sat at his computer with his customary after-dinner cognac. But then, out of nowhere, the very next day, he'd surprised me. For our anniversary, he was taking me to Chicago to stay at the hotel where we'd been married, in the very same suite, and to dinner at the very restaurant of my dreams, the one at the top of the Stock Exchange building. Really? I'd been astonished. Stan was normally frugal. Can we afford this? Stan had formed an uncharacteristically wide grin. It's our 10th anniversary, Claire. Once in 10 years, we should let it go, right? Do something unpredictable. And so there we were, in Chicago, at the Drake, spending a wad, even with the online discount. Celebrating. Or in Stan's case, gargling. Stan, I yelled, quiet down. He didn't answer, was gargling too loud. I crossed the suite, pressed my head against the window, wishing it would open so I could hear the din of the city instead of the liquid bubbling with Stan's glottal song. But not the television, not the entire city of Chicago could drown those sounds. As far as I knew, there was no reason to engage the vocal cords while gargling. In fact, as far as I knew, there was no reason to gargle. But Stan gargled religiously, loudly, at least twice a day and always after sex, singing the 5 notes, the C scale, up and down, counting the beats to measure the duration of disinfectant on his tongue and gingival tissues. Down on the beach, a haze of heat coated the sand. People moved sluggishly. Even traffic seemed slow. C, D, E, F, G, F, E, D, C. Across the outer drive on Lake Michigan, sailboats drifted lazily without much wind. Oh, to be on one of those boats. I imagined the hot sun on my skin, sipping a cool gin and tonic, slipping almost naked into the water, unable to see the shore, feeling the rolling waves, the living, surging chill of the lake. C, D, E, F, G, F, E, D, C. My fists pressed into my belly. I needed to relax, to change my attitude. I should be grateful. After all, Marcia's husband had left her with 3 kids, for a man, and Pam's was unemployed. Lynn was still single at 36, listening to the tick of her bio clock. Compared to them, I was well off. Stan made a decent living selling insurance. He was devoted to our son, and he'd come up with the idea for this getaway to the very hotel where we'd had our wedding. He even arranged for 8-year-old Stan Jr. to stay with my sister in Des Moines. But how long did he have to keep gargling? I ran my hands through my hair, trying to think about anything but the noise. Like our 10th wedding anniversary, the reason we were here. I couldn't actually remember the suite from our wedding night. Everything had been a haze of nerves and champagne. C, D, E, F, Stan, I hollered. Keep it down. I covered my ears, curled up in bed. How many people had slept in it, made love in it, fought in it, conceived babies in it? I tried to remember sharing it with Stan that night. He'd had all his hair then. He'd been suntanned, almost my height when I'd taken off my heels. He'd unzipped my dress with its full skirt. It had stood up by itself when I'd stepped out of it. We'd laughed about the toast his brother had made, getting my name wrong on purpose. Had he clipped his nails that night, or gargled? Had sex been better then, or just newer? Miraculously, the gargling stopped. I held my face, lifted my eyes in gratitude. Stan was done clipping and gargling. Next would be shaving, which, thank God, was silent. Nor would he make a sound as he trimmed the hair on his chest and under his arms, so it was cropped evenly and wouldn't clump. Never mind the wild, curly fur sprouting from his back unhindered. My arms itched. The news was over. Wheel of Fortune was starting. He must be done trimming by now. "Stan," I called. "Hurry up. I've still got to shower." The dinner reservation was for 8 o'clock. We had to leave in 20 minutes. "Stan," I shouted this time. "What the hell are you doing in there?" "Be right out, honey." No, he wouldn't. He still had to gel his receding hair. And then he'd have to flex. So help me. The man, short, paunchy, 40, and balding, never tired of looking at himself. After every shower, Stan posed in various bodybuilder stances, asking the same question verbatim. "Not bad for an old guy, right, Claire?" 10 years. 10 endless, predictable, monotonous years with the most unimaginative, predictable, monotonous man on earth. I chewed my lip, glared at the television until finally the water was off. Even with the door closed, I could see Stan arranging his hair, applying the gel, slapping his belly as if there were no flab, flexing, assessing himself, getting ready to ask the question. The door swung open. Stan stepped out butt naked, adopting a pose. Biceps flexed, head lowered, knees bent. "Not bad for an old guy, right, Claire?" I pushed past him, rolling my eyes. If I didn't hurry, we'd lose our dinner reservation. But at last, the bathroom was all mine. And the shower was strong, soothing. I stood still, eyes closed, letting warm water steam over me, rinsing tension out of my shoulders, savoring the solitude, and considering my options. I could have my own bathroom all the time. Could be free of coin jiggling and nail clipping, of flexing and finding body hair clippings all over the sink. All I had to do was divorce Stan. When he touched my face, I yelped in surprise and reflexively covered my breasts. I hadn't heard him come into the bathroom, let alone join me in the shower. Why? What was wrong? Oh God, was it Junior? Was he okay? Stan had already gelled his hair. Wouldn't it get wet again unless... "Stan? What happened?" I began, but he put a finger on my lips, hushing me, an arm around my neck, a kiss, ever so gently on my lips. Water poured over our heads, coated our faces. "But what?" I started again as soon as the kiss ended. He silenced me with another kiss, longer, deeper. His thick, wet body pressed against me. When the kiss finished, I lacked breath to ask another question. Actually, I couldn't speak at all. Couldn't remind him we had a dinner reservation. Couldn't remember it myself. Stan's kisses continued, traveled from my lips to my neck, to my shoulder, to my breasts. He moved slowly, steadily, undaunted by the water ruining his hair as his head moved lower and lower. I was stunned. "Stan? Shh." His head moved down my belly. In 10 years of our marriage, Stan had never done anything like what he was doing then in that shower. He knelt, his arms around my thighs, his face buried in between my legs, his kisses deep, his tongue deeper. Oh my. My head rose involuntarily, dizzily. I let out a moan, and another. I grabbed Stan's head and closed my eyes, letting go of all thought, losing myself in sensations of the moment. But suddenly, before I could register what he was doing, Stan grabbed my knees and stood, pulling my legs up high and out from under me, and I fell backwards, slamming my head against the rim of the tub, hearing a crack. "What the hell was that?" I demanded. He glared at me. "Unpredictable, huh? Predictable? How was that, Claire? Unpredictable enough for you?" "What's wrong with you? Was that supposed to be funny? You could have killed me. Fat nagging bitch." "Fat? You called me fat?" "For once you're not complaining? 10 long, insufferable years, Claire. 10 years. I put up with your nonstop whining and criticizing. Nothing, not one thing I ever did was right. Well, how'd I do now? I didn't fuck up this time, did I, you ungrateful cow?" "Cow? Excuse me," I sputtered. Stan had never, ever spoken to me that way. "You're calling me a cow, you hairy little orangutan?" He regarded me carefully. "Wait. You don't look right." He stooped and grabbed my ankles, pushing, twisting, pulling, rearranging my legs. "What are you doing, Stan? Help me up this minute." But he didn't help me up. He shoved one of my calves closer to the other, turning the ankle. Much better. He tilted his head, eyeing me, and got out of the shower. Where the hell are you going? I'm stuck. Stan, take my hand. He didn't take my hand. He didn't answer me either. He dried himself off, hung his towel up, and finally knelt beside me, holding my wrist. Happy fucking anniversary, he smiled, waited. What? Don't you have anything to say, Claire? He sucked air through his teeth. You bet I do. No nagging? No nitpicking ball-busting complaints? Stan cocked his head as if listening. I have plenty to say. Well, imagine that, airsuck. Finally, I must have done something right. What? Excuse me, you're proud of knocking me down? I was livid, incensed. You asshole, Stan. How dare you call me a cow? Look in the mirror, you tub of lard. But Stan wasn't listening, was busy gargling again. Sputtering and furious, I struggled to get up. Okay, enough. You completely took me by surprise. Congratulations. Now help me get up, damn it. The shower was still running, splashing my face. Stan, I'm serious. Help me up this minute. He ignored me. I tried to get up, couldn't manage it, kept slipping. Oh, God. Okay, he was right. I needed to lose weight. It shouldn't be so hard to pull myself up. Unless I was hurt. Maybe my neck was broken. Was I paralyzed? I must be. That must be why I couldn't stop him from rearranging my legs, and why nothing hurt. My nerves weren't working. My spine must be damaged. I belted out Stan's name. I yelled that I couldn't move, that he had to help me. But Stan's mouth was full of mouthwash. C, D, E, F, G, F, E, D, C. He didn't answer. While I screamed at him, he rinsed his mouth, put more gel in his hair, flexed a few times. Then, before he left the bathroom, he turned, tilted his head, and winked at me. Not bad for an old guy, right, Claire? Fuck you, asshole, I snarled. Asshole was a compliment. Alone, I struggled, planning ways to get even with him. Forget divorce, that was way too easy. Oh, I'd divorce him, but not until I'd made hell seem like an improvement to his miserable life. I'd lace his damn mouthwash with rat poison. I'd put acid in his hair gel. I'd spend every nickel he'd saved and revel in his debt. The rodent had just mocked me for being a sexual, sensual, full-bodied woman with desire, and he knocked me flat on my ass? No, Stan was going to pay. I'd see him bleed. But first, I had to sit up. I wiggled and squirmed, pulled, and finally inched my way to an upright position from which I assessed my body. My toes wiggled on command, fingers too. My parts were stiff and kind of numb, but they all moved. Nothing seemed to be bleeding or broken. No permanent harm had been done. Yet. Stan was going to be less fortunate. When I got my hands on him, this fat nagging bitch cow was going to cause him serious damage. Slowly, careful not to slip again, I climbed out of the shower and followed Stan into the bedroom. He was lounging in his robe, not even getting ready for dinner, acting as if he were in no rush. You shit! I went at him, fists raised to smash cartilage in his nose. Stan didn't even look at me, didn't flinch when I landed my punch, didn't spout blood or even wince in pain. I didn't get it. I'd hit him so hard that my knuckles reverberated. But he reached for the remote, channel surfing, unperturbed. Do not ignore me, I yelled and slapped him as hard as I could, right across his shiny, smooth-shaven face. No reaction, nothing. Absently, Stan whistled zippity-doo-dah. Was he whistling? I just assaulted him, and he was happy, oblivious. His cheeks weren't even red where I'd hit it. Okay. Something was off. Events weren't making sense. Maybe I was in shock, not perceiving accurately. Or maybe the fall knocked me unconscious and I was delirious, dreaming. Or maybe I'd never even fallen. Maybe none of the last 10 minutes had even happened. Maybe I'd dozed off and dreamed the whole scenario. Stan joining me in the shower, kissing me all over, putting his tongue between my legs. After all, the chances of that happening in reality were minuscule to none. And the part about him knocking me down, pulling my legs from under me? No, not Stan. He was the embodiment of passive, never assertive, let alone aggressive. So probably none of it had happened. Probably I was just asleep, dreaming, and if I tried, I could make myself wake up. Stan put down the remote, checked his watch, got off the bed, walked right past me to look in the mirror, and was smoothing his hair when someone knocked on the door. Room service. Room service? Why would there be room service? We had plans to go out for dinner. Stan had made reservations. This dream was too disturbing. Time to end it. I tried to wake myself up. Tried to open my eyes, but they already felt open. Pinched myself. Felt no pain. The dream continued. Stan opened the door for the room service delivery, and suddenly I remembered that, oh God, I've just come from the shower. I was standing there naked. I ducked back into the bathroom. Heard a voice ask Stan where he would like to have the meal set up. Stan shushed him. Lowered his voice to explain that dinner was a surprise for the missus, who was in the shower. In fact, come to think of it, she'd been in there quite a while. Maybe he'd just check on her. Stan's head poked through the bathroom door. Almost rammed me. What the hell, Stan? Room service? What about the dinner reservations? But he wasn't looking at me. Darling, Claire, are you almost... Stan stopped mid-sentence, opened his mouth, and let out a shockingly soprano howl. Oh God, Claire! He ran to the shower, reached in, kept repeating my name, whimpering, Oh God! I stood immobile, confused. What was he doing? What was in there? I stood beside the sink, watching, asking what's going on. He groaned, low and long. A young man in a hotel uniform raced in and stood behind Stan, gawking. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hide that I was naked. But the guy didn't glance at me. He reached into the shower and turned off the water, then just stared into the tub. Stan crouched there, soaked again, rocking back and forth on his knees, hugging a large naked woman who looked just like me. But it wasn't, couldn't be, and yet there she was. I stepped closer for a better look. Stan clung to the sopping thing, its hair all matted and drenched, its stretch marks and breasts exposed, everything exposed. He shouted into its ear, Claire, Claire, what happened? Did you slip? He looked at the gaping hotel guy. She wanted a shower before dinner got here. The shower floor must be too slippery. She must have slid and hit her head. Look, back there, it's all crushed. I felt my head, found a soft spot on the back. Oh God, she was fine not 10 minutes ago. Stan blithered on, all weepy and pathetic. And finally, I understood. This wasn't a bad dream. No, it was simply death. I was dead. Stan had fucking killed me. I looked into the mirror, saw dripping wet brown hair, the dimples in my cheeks, the mole on my neck. I touched my face, felt soft flesh just like always. I looked and felt real, but apparently nobody else saw me. I flew at Stan, shouting, What the hell have you done? Stan didn't notice. He jabbered. The hotel man's mouth had closed. He backed away. I'll go call... Stan stayed, hovering over the corpse as hotel managers, police, and emergency medical people arrived. When the coroner's people wanted to take the body, he held on tight, squeezing as if he couldn't let go. It's our anniversary, he cried. I ordered filet mignon and champagne. We were never going out to dinner, were we? You never even made reservations. Liar, I shouted. But nobody heard. Somebody covered Stan's shoulders with a blanket, helped him to his feet. I'm so sorry, sir. Someone else muttered, What a tragedy. Poor guy. Poor guy? What about his poor murdered wife? I wandered through the suite, watching, listening to strangers. Did you know they got married here? He brought her here for their 10th anniversary. How romantic. What a sweet guy. Tragic. You just never know. No, you never do. Certainly I never had. I'd never even suspected that Stan would lie to me about dinner, much less that he would have the balls to kill me. But there it was. Stan wept and cried. He honked as he blew his nose, snorted when he sniffed. People coddled him, gave him tea and whiskey. He trembled, asked if they thought he was in shock. A doctor was called. If anyone was in shock, though, it wasn't Stan. Stunned and shocked to the core, I watched my body get zipped into a coroner's bag and loaded onto a gurney. It wasn't until they rolled me out of the room that I really understood the full gravity of the truth. And possibly, despite my continued awareness and physical presence, I was really, actually, and permanently dead. So what was I, a ghost? Stan had turned me into a damned ghost? What did that mean? What was I supposed to do now? I paced the room, furious. feeling powerless, wanting to rip Stan's throat out, to strangle him, dissect his parts. How long had he been planning this, and why? I wasn't the one who was impossible to live with. Stan hadn't had to put up with endless air-sucking, muscle-flexing, nail-clipping, knee-bouncing, chest-hair trimming, finger-drumming, and our love life? For Stan, sex was just like everything else he did, predictable and inefficient. And did I mention dull? Damn, I'd been a good wife and mother. I'd put up with 10 years of monotony. And what did I get for it? A trip to Paris, a diamond necklace, even dinner out on the top of the stock exchange building? No, all I got was killed. My body wheeled off in a bag like last week's trash. I cursed. I fumed. Somehow, the hours passed. All that first night, hushed voices passed through our suite. The hotel manager offering food, drink, whatever Stan might need. Whispering with the police about minimizing media exposure about the unfortunate accident, for Stan's sake as well as their own. Arrangements were made for my autopsy. Apparently, it was standard procedure to verify my cause of death. Cause of death was murder, I shouted. I stood right in the officer's face and gave details, demonstrating how Stan had yanked my legs. The cop seemed to be looking at me. Maybe he'd be psychic. Maybe he'd hear me. He wasn't, and couldn't. He put a hand on Stan's arm. It's standard procedure. Just a formality, obviously. This was accidental. Stan broke into sobs. What will I tell our son? He blew his nose, honking. I screamed at his face. If you hadn't killed me, you miserable worm, you wouldn't have to tell him anything. But the cops bought his grief, shifted uncomfortably. That's going to be tough. How old is your boy? Stan sniffed, told them about Stan Jr., played the broken-hearted widower until someone came for the room service trays, at which point Stan began sobbing all over again. And finally, I understood about the room service dinner. Stan had ordered it for the sole purpose of having a witness present when he discovered my body. The trip to Chicago had never been about celebrating our wedding anniversary. All of that had been a lie, a subterfuge. Stan had planned every detail of the trip just to kill me. Coward, I shrieked. Lowlife, murderer. Of course, no one heard. Even so, I promised that he'd never raise our son in his image. I sat beside Stan and whispered into his ear, I promise you, Stan, I'll see you dead. He sipped whiskey, feigning grief. I sat behind him, growling. Eventually, the room became silent and dark. No managers, no police, no Stan, no me. My body was gone. The maids came in and cleaned, changing the linens, washing the marble floors, restocking the minibar, vacuuming, washing the toilet seat. I was glad to see that, had at times worried they didn't. And then I was alone, with nothing to do. It's amazing how empty time can be, and what the mind will do to fill it. For days, I watched dust float through morning light beams, counted small stains in the carpet, studied the bland artwork until I wanted to shred it. Occasionally, I heard dim plaintive wailing, and I called out, convinced that someone else was dead in a nearby room, but got no reply. Mostly, I spent my time trying to figure out what it was to be dead. And I figured out that if I could see and hear and feel things, it followed that I should be able to use my energy, exert it somehow. First, I tried to open the door. I spent hours on the doorknob, squeezing and twisting. Finally gave up. Concentrated on pushing the television remote control button. I don't know how much time it took, but eventually, with great effort and focus, I was able to turn on the television and even change channels. I also managed to turn on a light switch, turn on the faucet. These were my accomplishments, my great feats of achievement. Actions that you, the living, don't even think about, took every bit of my strength and will, exhausted me. Sometime later, the door opened. A man came in wearing a suit, carrying a briefcase. He called his wife, said he was beat, got undressed, and went to bed with the television on. Snored. I wasn't going to listen to the snoring. Stan's had been bad enough. So I turned up the volume of the television until it woke him. He turned the set off. When he started snoring, I turned it on again. We went like that all night. He was unremarkable, but I remember him because he was the first. And because when he left in the morning, I tried to leave too. When he opened the door, I stepped forward, but got sucked back. The room pulled me in, as if it was a vacuum cleaner and I was lint. People came and went. They say people do odd things in hotel rooms. Hot sex, call girls, three-ways, S&M. Sorry, I didn't see any of that. My visitors were painfully dull. Sometimes, out of boredom, just to rattle them, I turned the lights on and off, or the water. People would call and complain to the management. Their television volume was haywire, rising and falling randomly. The water in the shower turned hot and cold. But there was no satisfaction in these pranks. I kept them up simply because I could. A couple of times, I actually made contact. A small child was sleeping in the bed while her parents entertained in the parlor. She woke up crying from a nightmare. I told her not to be afraid and promised to stay with her. That seemed to soothe her. She nodded, went back to sleep. And an elderly man pointed at me and made a fuss as soon as they brought him in. "What's that naked woman doing here?" His daughter ignored the question, remarked about the beautiful room. "I want a new room. This one's occupied." He scowled at me. "Who are you?" "I'm just a ghost. Pay no attention." I was thrilled that he could see me. If he could also hear me, maybe we could talk. Maybe I could have company. "A ghost? A ghost, you say?" "Daddy, calm down. Nobody said anything." "Don't bother telling them. They can't see me." The man turned ashen, opened his mouth, clutched his chest, sat gasping. "Claudia?" "Dad, you okay?" "Claudia, is it you?" "No, my name's Claire." "Who are you talking to? Mom's gone, Daddy. You know that." The daughter's brows knit. He gaped at me. Spit dribbled from his mouth. The daughter picked up the phone. EMTs came and took him away. Other than those two, I was alone, confined to a hotel suite, apparently for eternity. I drifted from chair to bed, bed to window, where I watched the living driving cars or stuck in traffic. I watched the lake empty of swimmers and sailboats and fill with gray ice, while sleet and snow lined its shores. Outside, time passed and seasons changed. But within my suite, all that changed were linens. Everything else remained the same, including my fury. Stan. How was I to get revenge if I couldn't leave the hotel room? I devised plan after plan. One involved writing a note to the police. I worked the drawer of the desk, finally managing to open it, even to retrieve a pen and a notepad. Writing was more difficult. Lifting the pen required a weightlifter's strength. Manipulating it was a Herculean task. Exhaustion overcame me as I worked the pen, struggling to form an S, then a T. It seemed an age before I'd managed to write Stan. I intended to write Stan Winston murdered his wife and give details. But the maids came in, cleaning. My paper and pen disappeared. I would have to start all over again, opening the desk drawer. And all this time, Stan was out there, living his life, raising Junior to clip, gargle, and flex. Rage, I learned, didn't go away. In fact, rage was what sustained me. I felt larger, more powerful when I focused on it. It helped me persist and practice new skills. Locking and unlocking doors, unplugging lights. Raging at Stan, I opened the drapes, closed them, tossed pillows into the air, even unwrapped a bar of soap. You're probably scoffing now. You're saying, big whoop, she unwrapped a bar of soap. But you have no idea what it's like to perform these mundane tasks by sheer strength of will and concentration, without the use of a physical body. Scoff now, but wait a while. When you're dead, you'll be in awe of me. Anyway, seasons passed. Guests came and went. I became despondent, stopped paying attention. Until one day, the staff came in with flowers and welcome baskets and champagne on ice. The maids chattered about the newlyweds. I thought of me and Stan, how this had been our bridal suite too. Kinda creepy. Claire dusted the dressers. I guess, but he stays for free now. Still, if I were him, you couldn't pay me to come back here. Why does he care about the past? After that lawsuit, he's a rich man. Katrina tested the TV remote. And don't forget the life insurance. Yeah, I heard it paid double because of some clause. Vacuum up those flower petals. The GM wants everything perfect. Fuck the GM. She turned on the vacuum. I moved to the window, dreading spending the night with a young couple in love. Once again, I tried to leave with the maids. I clung to one of them as she moved through the doorway, but she was ripped from me, and I bounced back into the suite as if I'd hit a trampoline. I was stuck in a parlor filled with floral arrangements. Frustrated, I plucked petals off the blossoms and scattered them on the rug. I was tugging on an orchid when the door swung open. A radiant blonde bride in a lavish gown burst over the threshold. In the arms of Stan. That's right, Stan. My Stan. Stan the liar, Stan the killer. With his new wife, a young thing of maybe 25. She giggled as he dumped her onto the bed in her lavish lace and pearl dress. Giggled as he plopped beside her and kissed her. "What do you think, Mrs. Winston?" She sat up, looked around, gazed right at me. "Not too shabby, Mr. Winston." Then again, why was I surprised that he'd bring her here? Hadn't the maids just said that Stan could stay there for free? Apparently he had big bucks now, between life insurance and a lawsuit against the hotel. My death had made him rich. I stood there, gawking. The bride had implants, wore blue eyeshadow. Her nails had acrylic tips, and on her left hand, she wore my rings. I looked at my hand, saw the exact same set. Stan, the apparently new millionaire, had scrimped, giving his bride his dead wife's square-cut diamond engagement ring and wedding band. I sucked air through my teeth. They fondled each other, kissed, canoodled, made chirping sounds. I stood wrapped at the foot of the bed, watching him unzip her gown. When she stepped out of it, it stood on its own. I knocked it over and watched him kiss her, anticipating his every move. Tempted to announce them. Next event, tongue jab. Coming up, pelvic press. I recognized the pattern, counted thrusts. Stan's partner had changed, but the dance was exactly the same. I watched, frozen, too appalled to turn on the television or the lights. I didn't even knock their luggage to the floor. Didn't anything. When they finished, Stan got up and went into the bathroom. He began whistling zippity-doo-dah, jolting me back to my senses. Stan was here, within my reach. This was my chance. I followed him into the bathroom, stood beside him as he did his after-sex gargling. I even joined in, gargling along in awful harmony with his sea scales. Finally, he stepped into the shower. Locking the bathroom door, I stepped in with him. Stan lathered up, letting the water cascade over his shoulders. I planted a kiss on his mouth. He wiped it away as if something tickled. I copied his pattern, planting kisses along his neck onto his chest. Hairless? Had he waxed it? I moved on, kissed his belly, and his hand followed my mouth, scratching away the tingle of a dead woman's lips. Finally, I squatted. My mouth closed in, hooked on, and confused him. Stan stopped whistling and looked down. Must have wondered why his privates were standing up and dancing on their own. But before he could react, I centered my energy, grabbed him behind the knees, and yanked them high as I stood up. Stan fell backwards. His skull made a sharp cracking sound as it slammed the rim of the tub. His eyes remained open as water streamed into them. His jaw hung limp. Stan was dead. I'd done it. I'd taken my revenge. I felt delirious, giddy. I laughed out loud. I chortled and hooted. I yelled, "Yahoo! Not bad for a dead woman, huh, Stan?" I got out of the tub and danced a triumphant jig. I sang zippity-doo-dah and howled. I celebrated my revenge as steam coated the mirrors and mist filled the air. Finally, gloating and breathless, I turned back to the shower and, just to congratulate myself once more, looked inside. Stan hadn't moved. He lay sprawled in the tub, water still pouring into his open eyes. "Claire?" His eyes widened. He sucked air through his teeth as he tried to sit up. Oh, God. Stan lifted his head, peeling away from his body, looking back at himself, gaping at his corpse. I stood motionless, dumb. "Stanny?" The blonde jiggled the doorknob. "Honey cake room service is here." Her voice jarred me to action. I unlocked the bathroom door, and as she swung it open, I bolted. Stan pushed himself out of the tub, roaring, coming after me. "You bitch!" he yelled. "Come back here!" I sped past the bride, dodged the busboy and his cart, felt Stan's energy grabbing at me as with the full force of my raging spirit, I charged the open door to the hall, desperate to break free. I actually had one leg out of the door before the vacuum-like force took hold and sent me flying backward. I soared helplessly across the suite, landing limbs akimbo on an easy chair just a moment before Stan crashed on top of me, cursing. For an endless moment, we sat that way, glaring at each other, dazed and unable to move. But then, in the bathroom, a woman screamed.
That was Bliss by Mary Jones, read by Scott Detrow. Learn more about Mary at her website, maryjones.com. That's Merry, maryjones.com. You can find links to her website, her books, and more in the show notes for this episode on my website, ericarneson.com. That's ERIKARNESON.com. Every episode of the Word Crimes podcast is archived at ericarneson.com. I'm also at Eric Arneson on Twitter and easy to find on Facebook. You can find Scott Detrow on Twitter at Scott, DETROW. And that's all for this episode of Title 18 Word Crimes. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher, and if you enjoy the show, please do take a minute to rate Word Crimes. Future episodes will feature stories by Dwayne Swarzinski, John McGoran, and Paul Brazil. The music on this episode is by The Throws. You can find them at The Throws, THROES, thethrows.com. Thanks again for listening to Title 18 Word Crimes. We'll be back soon.